I want to tell you a story that still haunts me. It is the story of a woman who thought she could tame wildlife, and how that wildlife reminded her of her true nature in an instant. What happened on a cold February morning in a small Oregon town changed the lives of many people forever. Melissa Harrison has always been special. As a child, she brought home injured birds, squirrels with broken legs, and even once brought home a half-dead possum. Her parents were at first amused by this kindness, but eventually became concerned. The girl literally lived for animals, as if she understood them better than people. After graduating from veterinary college, Melissa got a job at the local zoo. Her co-workers quickly noticed her special gift. She could calm the most aggressive animals with a single touch. Even an old grizzly bear who wouldn't let anyone near him let her clean his cage. The zoo director often said she had golden hands. At the age of 32, Melissa received an unexpected inheritance from her aunt, a large plot of land in the woods and a decent amount of money. She quit her job at the zoo and decided to fulfill her longtime dream of creating a private sanctuary for wild animals. Her idea was a noble one, to give a home to those who have suffered at the hands of humans or cannot survive in the wild. The first residents of the reserve were two wolves rescued from poachers, followed by a family of raccoons and a blind owl. Melissa built spacious enclosures for them, studied their habits, and spent all her savings on quality food and veterinary care. The locals were suspicious at first, but gradually got used to being neighbors of an unusual sanctuary. Everything changed the day she got a call from the circus. Their black panther Luna was seriously ill and they needed to find her a new home. The circus vets warned that the animal might not survive, but Melissa didn't hesitate for a second. She knew she was taking on a huge responsibility, but her heart had already made up its mind. Luna arrived at the sanctuary in a terrible condition. She was a female black leopard about 6 years old. Her fur was faded, her eyes were cloudy with disease, and her movements were sluggish and uncertain. Melissa nursed her day and night, feeding her from her hands, talking to her in a quiet voice. Gradually, the panther began to recover. A month later, Luna was transformed into a magnificent animal. Her black fur glistened in the sun, her muscles played under her skin, and her yellow eyes burned with wild beauty. But what struck Melissa the most was that the panther seemed attached to her. It purred when the woman approached the cage, rubbed against the bars when she reached out a hand. Luna's enclosure was the largest in the sanctuary, 20 meters long and 15 wide, with a high ceiling and trees inside. Melissa set up surveillance cameras to study the panther's behavior. She spent hours with her, watching her play with a ball, hunting birds that happened to fly into the enclosure. Local veterinarian Dr. Thomas Miller had warned Melissa several times that she was dealing with a large predator. He'd seen her enter the cage to clean it or bring in food, and each time he felt alarmed. "Melissa, remember, this isn't a house cat," he'd say, but she only smiled back. With each passing month, the bond between the woman and the panther grew stronger and stronger. Melissa spent several hours a day in the enclosure. She read books, drank tea, and even fell asleep on the bench while Luna snoozed peacefully nearby. Neighbors who happened to look into the reserve could not believe their eyes. The woman and the predator coexisted in perfect harmony. But there were disturbing moments. Sometimes Luna would freeze, staring into the forest outside the enclosure, something primal and wild in her eyes. Melissa felt a chill run down her spine, but she convinced herself that it was just natural instincts that would never completely disappear. In winter, Luna became more restless. She started pacing around the enclosure, making strange noises that had never been heard before. Melissa thought it was related to the mating season and increased the time she spent with the panther, hoping to calm her down. She didn't notice a new trait in the animal's behavior, paying close attention to her neck. Dr. Miller, who had come for a routine checkup, was alarmed by the panther's behavior. Luna was walking in circles, keeping her eyes on Melissa, and when her back was turned, the predator moved closer to the bars of the cage. "She's hunting," the vet said. "That's hunting behavior, Melissa. You need to be more careful." But Melissa couldn't believe that her Luna was capable of hurting her. She saw the panther as a friend, a companion, almost a family member. She brought her breakfast every morning, dinner every night. They spent sunsets together, and Melissa told the panther about her plans for the future, about the new animals she wanted to save. On February 13th, the first snow fell. Melissa, as usual, came to Luna's house with the morning feeding. The panther seemed calm, even affectionate. She was rubbing against the bars, purring. The woman entered the enclosure, set down a bowl of meat, and turned to check the drinker. At that moment, something changed in the air. Luna moved silently like a shadow. Melissa didn't hear the predator approach from behind. She felt only hot breath on her neck, and then the explosive pain. The panther's fangs sank into the base of her skull, the exact spot where predators grab their prey in the wild. The woman tried to scream, but only a wheeze escaped her throat. Luna held tight, her powerful jaws clenching tighter and tighter. Melissa tried to reach for the walkie-talkie she always carried, but her hands wouldn't listen. Her consciousness began to fade, and the last thing she remembered were the panther's yellow eyes, which held no malice or hatred, just ancient, primal instinct. She was found by Dr. Miller, who had come to pick up the test results. He saw the open door of the enclosure and realized that something terrible had happened. Luna sat in the far corner of the cage, licking her paws. Melissa lay motionless, her neck mangled and a dark stain on the snow. The veterinarian immediately called an ambulance and the police. The doctors fought for Melissa's life for 2 hours, but they could not save her. She had lost too much blood and her injuries were too severe. A woman who dedicated her life to saving animals was killed by the teeth of someone she considered her friend. The news of the tragedy traveled across the country. Journalists traveled to the small town, and locals were interviewed about how they had warned Melissa of the danger. Her family was shocked. They knew about her work with animals, but had no idea how risky it was. Melissa's parents, Robert and Mary Harrison, arrived at the scene of the tragedy a day after it happened. They were broken with grief, but the first thing they did was ask that the panther not be killed. Melissa wouldn't have wanted that, the mother said through tears. She understood the risks and accepted them. Luna was just following her instincts. The panther was transported to a large zoo where she had a new home, safer for her and for people. Specialists noted that Luna was not aggressive or sick. She simply exhibited natural predator behavior. In the wild, such attacks happen regularly, especially when the prey's back is turned. Melissa's sanctuary was closed a month after her death. The remaining animals were distributed to zoos and sanctuaries. Neighbors said the forest was too quiet now, as if life itself had gone with Melissa. Her house still stands empty, and local children avoid it, telling each other scary stories. Animal behavior experts used Melissa's case as an example of why wild predators should never be kept in private hands. Dr. Sarah Connolly, a zoo psychologist at Stanford, explained that even the most tame predators retain instincts that can manifest themselves at any moment. People often think that love and care can change the nature of an animal, she said in an interview. But a predator remains a predator no matter how long it lives around humans. Luna wasn't mean or vindictive. She was just a cougar, and at a certain point, her instincts took over from affection. Melissa's friends said she was always aware of the risks of her job. A few months before the tragedy, she had even made a will asking her to take care of her animals in case of emergency. It was as if she had a premonition that one day her love for wild creatures might turn against her. In her diary, found after her death, was an entry made a week before the tragedy. "The moon is strange today. It looks at me in a peculiar way. But I can't stop loving her. She is a part of my life, and I am ready to accept any consequences of that choice." The local newspaper wrote about Melissa as a woman who lived on the edge between the civilized world and the wild. Her story was a warning to other enthusiasts who think they can tame the undomesticated. But at the same time, she showed that there are people who are willing to risk everything for the sake of those they love. A year after the tragedy, the city erected a monument to Melissa, a small granite slab with an engraved inscription, "To those who lived for others." Dozens of people whose animals she once saved gathered at the unveiling ceremony. They talked about how, thanks to her, their pets were given a second chance at life. Melissa's parents set up an animal foundation in her memory. They are continuing her work, but with much greater precautions. Melissa was right that animals deserve our help, her father says. But she was wrong in thinking she could change their nature through the power of love. Dr. Miller, who found Melissa's body, still works as a veterinarian. He says that day changed his perspective on working with wild animals. Now he always remembers the words he should have said to Melissa but didn't dare. Loving animals doesn't mean you should forget about their nature. Luna has been living in the zoo for 3 years. The keepers say that she is calm and does not show any aggression towards people. but no one goes into her enclosure. A sign next to her cage tells the story of Melissa Harrison, a woman who loved animals more than her own safety. Melissa's case prompted a revision of Oregon's wildlife keeping laws. Special training and equipment are now required to obtain a license. These changes have been dubbed Melissa's Law, a final gift from a woman who continues to protect both people and animals after her death. As I studied this story, I realized the most important thing. The line between love and danger is sometimes so thin that it can be crossed without even noticing. Melissa Harrison was not a reckless adventurer. She was a professional who simply believed that the heart is stronger than instinct. Her tragedy reminds us that wildlife is beautiful precisely because it remains wild, unpredictable, and beyond human control. What happened to Melissa could happen to anyone who forgets that behind the beautiful eyes of a predator there is always an ancient survival program. Luna wasn't evil, she was just being herself. And perhaps that is the worst lesson of this story. Sometimes tragedy happens not because of hatred or cruelty, but because we forget. Nature knows no exception. While researching this case, I discovered details that make Melissa's story even more tragic. 3 weeks before her death, she recorded a video for her animal blog. The footage shows her sitting next to Luna's enclosure and talking about the sanctuary's expansion plans. The panther is lying just a meter away from her at this time, with only the bars of the cage standing between them. "I know a lot of people think I'm crazy," Melissa says into the camera, and her voice sounds surprisingly calm. "But when you see these creatures suffer, you realize you have to act. Luna trusts me and I trust her. We understand each other without words." At that moment, the panther raises her head and looks directly at her, and there was something unsettling in her gaze even then. Melissa's neighbor, elderly Dorothy Clark, told me that a month before the tragedy, she heard strange noises coming from the preserve. "There was a roaring sound at night," she recalled. "Not the usual kind. More wilder or something. I wanted to tell Melissa, but she was so involved with her animals that I'm afraid she wouldn't listen." A review of veterinary records showed that in the last weeks of her life, Melissa increased her time in the enclosure with Luna to 4 to 5 hours a day. She attributed this to the fact that the panther was stressed by the cold weather and needed the extra support. But experts now believe that it was this excessive attention that may have triggered the predator's hunting behavior. Dr. Michael Ashton, an expert on the behavior of big cats from the University of California, has studied video footage from the sanctuary's surveillance cameras. According to him, in recent days, Luna has been showing classic signs of preparation for hunting. She has been following Melissa's movements, adopting characteristic postures, and her tail has been moving in a special way. Melissa interpreted these signals as playfulness or affection, Dr. Ashton explains. But in reality, Luna was preparing for an attack. Predators can study potential prey for weeks before striking. Tragedy was inevitable. The only question was timing. Particularly painful for the family was the discovery at Melissa's house. In her bedroom hung a large photograph of her hugging Luna through the bars of her cage. The panther is nuzzling her, and in the photo it looks like a show of affection. But now, knowing the ending of the story, the shot seems like a frightening omen. Melissa's brother, David Harrison, admitted to me that the family tried to talk her out of working with large predators. "A year before she died, we had a family council," he tells me. "They asked her to at least install extra security measures, double fencing. But Melissa said it would offend Luna, that it would show distrust. This detail is particularly striking. Melissa so humanized the panther that she attributed human emotions to it. She was afraid to offend the predator with precautionary measures." Psychologists call this anthropomorphization, the dangerous tendency to endow animals with human qualities and motives. An examination of medical records revealed another disturbing fact. Melissa had been taking antidepressants in recent months. Her doctor, Dr. Elizabeth Smith, confirmed that she was going through a difficult period. The reserve required large financial investments, local authorities threatened inspections, and some neighbors complained about the noise. Melissa felt like the whole world was against her and her animal, says Dr. Smith. Luna was not just a pet to her, but an ally, the only being who understood her. This emotional dependence made her blind to real danger. The tragedy of the situation was compounded by the fact that Melissa was a truly talented professional. Her former colleagues at the zoo say that she had a better intuitive understanding of animals than many people with decades of experience. But that intuition failed her at the most critical moment. Melissa was able to read the body language of animals, to anticipate their reactions, recalls former colleague James Foster. But with Luna, she lost that ability. Love blinded her professional sense. She saw what she wanted to see, not what was real. Analysis of the surveillance footage revealed another eerie detail. On the day of the tragedy, Melissa had been in the enclosure longer than usual. She was sitting on a bench reading a book while the moon slowly circled around her, gradually reducing its radius. It went on for almost an hour, and all that time the woman didn't notice that she was becoming the center of a hunting ritual. Experts believe Melissa's behavior in those final minutes was a fatal mistake. She turned her back to the predator and leaned over to check the drinker. This movement triggered the panther's attack instinct. In the wild, this is the behavior of tired or sick prey, an easy target. Luna has been waiting for just this moment, Dr. Ashton explains. Predators are patient, they can wait hours for the perfect opportunity. When Melissa turned her back and leaned in, that was the signal for action. It all happened in seconds. She didn't stand a chance. The relatives of the victim are still wondering whether they could have prevented the tragedy. Melissa's mother, Mary Harrison, blames herself for not insisting that the sanctuary be closed. I watched her change, she says through tears, becoming more and more withdrawn, living only for her animals. But I thought it would pass. The father, Robert Harrison, recounted the last conversation he had with his daughter. It was a week before the tragedy, and Melissa sounded unusually excited. She talked about Luna like she was her child, he recalled. Said the cougar was sad and needed more attention. I offered to find a mate for Luna, but Melissa replied that no one would understand their bond. This detail is particularly painful. Melissa did consider finding Luna a partner, but abandoned the idea due to jealousy. She was afraid that the arrival of another panther would ruin their special relationship. Selfishness disguised as caring was costing her her life. Local Sheriff Tom Anderson, who was the first to arrive on the scene, still remembers that day in great detail. I've been on the force for 20 years, seen a lot of things, he says, but the sight of Melissa and that cougar up close. Luna sat there calmly like nothing had happened. She wasn't aggressive, she wasn't growling, just sat there looking at us. It was scarier than any rage. The sheriff also noted a strange detail. There was no sign of a struggle in the enclosure. The food bowl stood untouched, Melissa's book lying open on the bench. It seemed as if life had simply stopped in an instant. She didn't even have time to be scared, Anderson suggests. It all happened in an instant. The autopsy confirmed that Melissa had died from blood loss and spinal damage. The panther's fangs had penetrated precisely between her vertebrae, the perfect hunting bite that predators use to kill their prey instantly. It wasn't a rage attack, but the cold, calculated strike of an experienced hunter. Dr. Patrick O'Brien, who performed the autopsy, noted that Melissa had no other injuries. The panther didn't torment the body, didn't play with it, he explained. One precise bite and it was over. This shows that Luna acted purely on instinct, without emotion. This fact was an additional blow to the family. They had hoped to find some logic, some explanation for what had happened, but they were faced with cold biological reality. Luna hadn't killed Melissa out of anger or fear just because it was her nature. The court case over the inheritance of the reserve lasted several months. Melissa's parents wanted to sell the land, but the will contained a strange condition. The property had to remain a sanctuary for another 10 years. Even after her death, Melissa tried to protect her animals. In the end, the family made a compromise. They created a small memorial park on part of the territory and sold the rest of the land to the state to expand the National Reserve. Wild animals were protected, but without risking human lives. Luna lived in the new zoo for 2 more years after the tragedy. Keepers noted that she was healthy and calm, never showed aggression to the staff. But in 2019, the panther died suddenly of a heart attack. Veterinarians found no explanation. The animal was young and healthy. Perhaps Luna was pining, suggested zoo psychologist Dr. Sarah Connolly. Predators are also capable of attachment, and losing Melissa may have been traumatic for her. The irony is that the cougar may have loved the woman she killed. It's just that her love was wild, uncontrollable.